Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the RPC podcast. Tonight we have a special guest with us known as username ReddJive. He is I think you've told us before that you are an amateur competitive bodybuilder, if that is the case. Powerlifter, sorry. Why don't you tell us a little bit about some of your story? How did you come to Christ? What brought you to the Red Pill? And then we can dive into our topic for the day, which is, of course, lifting is not a suggestion.
So I've always been a Christian to one degree or another, as you're younger and you go through life. There was a time when I was in the Army, when I was about to get ready, that I actually thought about being an Army chaplain. But then that fancy dwindled as other things in the military caught my interest and I moved on with it. I got out of the service, and like most men that come to the Red Pill, I was having all those problems with my wife and my family and my career. It just, things just weren't working and I couldn't figure it out. And of course, many men that come to the Red Pill, you type in the internet, why won't my wife do X? And you find it. Then I spent 5 years on Married Red Pill. You can find me there. I'm an endorsed member of TRP and a flared member of the MRP. I haven't been on there in a while. Most men, when they become unplugged and then they start you start getting your head of steam, you spend some time giving back to the guys there, and then all of a sudden don't need to spend so much time on the internet. There's life out there to get done. And my pattern for about a year was to every couple months to leave, go do my life, then jump back on the net for a little while until eventually I was no longer there, which now brings me up to 3 or 4 months ago when he brought me back. He just life just put me to my knees. And there was no other choice. I'm here now. So that's it in a nutshell.
I had a quick question about that. I was reading your post that you had written a long time ago, and I remember having seen it when you'd first posted it on RPC, and it's kind of your story and your back history. And if anybody's interested, I think it's still up there, so it gets into more of the weeds of what all that meant. But you did mention in there that you had a BA in ancient history and the early church, and I thought that was interesting. You mentioned wanting to go Army chaplain for a little bit. Was that before or after you had that degree path?
It was well after. I was an Army officer. So you become an officer, you have to have a BA, and I was in the ROTC.
Got it.
So I got that. I studied under Dr. Paul Meyer, if anybody knows who he is. In fact, I was at a crossroads when I graduated. It was either to accept my orders to active duty or accept his offer to go to Egypt on a dig. So that was a very tough decision for me, but I made one. So yeah.
Yeah,
that would be tough.
Very cool. And then I guess follow-up question unrelated to that, but so in part of your journey, you mentioned that you were pretty involved in TRP, MRP. Sometimes those crowds are a little bit less than, we'll just say, enthusiastic about Christian ideas. Did you find that there was any kind of like pushback or ribbing when you started getting involved at all in RPC, or was it all pretty well good-natured?
On MRP, it's more good-natured because here's. I'm probably going to get flack from some of the older guys. And I don't know if John agrees, but in MRP, it is more accepted because the men are, technically more mature. They've got their established life. They've got goals, even if they're blue pilled or just coming along. They've still got goals. They've got family. They know, they get it. TRP, believe it or not, and this is really not a secret, the majority of men are TRP. Everybody knows are really not there to grow. They're there to anger out, do whatever they're going to say. And the mods on the TRP actually do a really good job of getting rid of those bad actors. But they fully know that maybe 10% of the guys on TRP are actually going to unplug and get with the program. It's well known. It's not like, but so when you bring it down to MRP, I was there, when Jack 10 of Hearts and Ultimate CAD and other of these guys that started MRP, their goal was to try to help every man that came to them. They weren't just going to throw away a guy unless his ego was too big. TRP, not the case at all. They'll put all the stuff up there. They'll put out the lessons, but whether or not the man gets it or not, they're really not concerned about it. If they start to grow and get the attention, then they'll take interest. But there, it's a dog-eat-dog world. And it kind of works, and then, you bring it to RPC where we try to save every guy, or you guys try to save every guy that comes along. So it gets narrower and narrower and more contextual as you go.
Don't worry. One of my biggest sadnesses. I was just going to say, one of my biggest sadnesses that I found is that I did not join MRP soon enough to connect with Jack 10 of Hearts. Man, all of his stuff is great.
That guy was a savant. I mean, there's even a rumor that people think he was Pook.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah. I mean, you read his stuff. I mean, when he dissects a guy's comments, it's like you're like, holy crap, how is he figuring this out just from the man's post? And he
Yeah,
did it to me several times. I don't know if you can find his on commenting on mine when I was unplugging, but I'm like, holy crap, he's right. How did I not see this?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'll have to go back and read some of his stuff again. I came up through kind of the PUA scene early on before there even was the red pill. And so, Puck was a big character and all of that. And there was a handful of others that all but disappeared when, RP came along. And so it makes me wonder how many of them rebranded and continued on with their comments. So that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Well, as far as Jack 10, his comment was the first one to really hit me upside the head. I'm setting yourself on fire to keep others warm, and I'm proud of that, and yet not proud of that. I'm glad the comment was written, but oh man, that was a that was a really hard thing to swallow. And yeah, he made it as harsh as possible. So yeah, that was good times.
Yeah. So on that note, and this is going to be kind of a bit of a transition into our topic here, you just mentioned you got slapped upside the head with some kind of undeniable truth and it wasn't a pulled punch. And I think that's one of the big benefits of lifting in general is you either pick up the weight or you don't. It's a pretty objective feedback loop there. And so, that's just one of those benefits that come at you. And if you can't do it, you're either doing something wrong or you're just not strong enough. And typically you're not strong enough because you're not doing something right or you're not consistent enough. So, Jerry, you have some pretty impressive lifts from what I hear. And I'm curious, what does your training background look like?
And before you give that, actually, it might be worthwhile just to establish the credibility here. What are your current PRs?
Bro, do you even lift?
My current ones, I don't know. So that's because 2020, as we all know, really kind of killed the gym scene, especially here. I went into the 2020 expecting to hit the APF and take middle rank, but all those got canceled. The gyms got shut down for about 4 or 5 months in Michigan, and I lost almost all my strength. I mean, I've lost muscle tone. And then once the gym started up and I started getting back into it, my lifts were around the middle grade. So I started 2020 at a squat of 650, a bench of 525, and a deadlift of 765. Good competitive numbers for this area. Then I got back into it. I was growing again, getting back ready to hit the winter. And then I got sick with COVID and hospitalized for a couple of weeks. I lost over 60 pounds in those 2 weeks. The only thing I could keep down was Gatorade and Diet Vernors. That was it.
Crazy.
I probably slept, maybe 2 hours a night. And then there was several days while I was in the hospital because I also got hit with a diabetic emergency. I was doing the experimental treatment of remdesivir and I can't even say this steroid, dexamethasone. But it spiked my blood sugar to 800, and I was awake for 3 days straight as they were trying to bring my sugars down. So I came out of there weak, 60 pounds lighter. Mobility was shot. Everything was gone. So there have been no PRs hit right now. So my coach has me on a rebuild plan for the last couple months, and the goal at the end of March is to start test my 1 rep maxes again.
So suffice it to say, though, you don't get to a point where you have at least a lifetime PR for the bench press over 500 without having the know-how of what you're doing to get there, right?
Right, and that gets back to the question Oz was just asking. So I've been powerlifting since I was in high school. And at that time, those days, you were lifting in the basements and the boiler rooms and things like that. Really no plan. You were just lifting a weight and then you're trying to increase that the next day and then increase that the next day. Just doing some progressive things, very much like strong lift 5x5. And then over the years, I backed off a little bit. The military doesn't like big guys, so I ran more, but I still was lifting to keep some form and keep some muscle tone. I got out, of course, blue pilled out for a few years. So I got fat and lazy, got into CrossFit as I got into the red pill. And it was through CrossFit for a couple of years that I realized I refound my love of powerlifting and hit it hard. But throughout those years of all my lifting, I wouldn't get above 450. And I just thought I was one of those guys that just didn't have the genetics, because that was really that was what everyone was saying. You're genetically disposed for this, and you're a big guy, but maybe you just can't do it. And I'll just bring it up. I don't know if anybody else who knows this, who was in the gym those days, but there was a belief that over 900 pounds, you would rip your skin. The pressure of lifting it, you would just blow your hands out or something like that. No one ever thought you could go over 900 pounds. And then that's how Louis Simmons and the Westside Barbell came onto the scene, and they just changed. He just changed the landscape of strength training. So why that's important for me and in my growth, about 3 or 4 years ago, I got tired of getting to the 450 and hurting myself, and then having to wait, go back and do that slow crawl back up again. And I said, I'm going to find a guy I'm going to find a coach who knows strength training and powerlifting. And I'm going to do whatever he says. And, not realizing it was God who directed me there, but he directed me to the Rochester Performance Gym. And that's where I found my coach, Ben Pauly. And it's just been a straight up climb. He told me on my first day, he just told me to work out. He'd watch me work out. And he came up to me after I did my second squat rep, and he said, "You've got a lot of strength, but you don't know what you're doing." And that was soul crushing, because 20 years, I know how to squat, I know how to bench. Turns out I didn't.
So when you watch other guys lift, how often do you have that exact same impression of them?
A lot.
I imagine you probably would have me even.
But you have to temper that too. Not everybody wants to get to those elite levels. You have to, I was, so I didn't post it out for everyone, because I don't want to put a lot of out there. There's a lot of different ways you can do things, but I did that video for Levi on those first two primitive or ancestral movements that they call it.
Really appreciate that, by the way. I checked it out, watched the thing. It was great. I don't know if that was that the full rundown of your mobility drill, or was that just, I thought that was just part of it.
That's like the first two movements, which are about the first 5 or 10 minutes.
Okay. And how many movements do you do for your mobility kind of warm up?
It depends on my workout for the day. I look at that first, and I'm now at the point where I can just decide what I'm going to do and what I need to do. But of the primitive movements, I probably do the first 5, and then I work on specific things that I need. Because for me, my hips are kind of an issue, so I got to work on more flexibility in my hips.
So did you post that into the fitness channel of the Discord then?
I didn't. I wanted Levi to see it first and get his opinion and see if something needed to be fixed or changed when I did it, because there's a voiceover aspect to it as well.
I'd like to see that at some point.
Yeah. On behalf of our audience, I'm sure there'd be a lot of interest in that.
Okay.
So the only thing that I would improve is there's one section where the audio was really hard to hear. It was when you were actually demonstrating the movements, where it was like fuzzy. But other than that, solid. And I was able to hear everything. It was just I had to kind of focus.
Okay.
I was waiting for Levi to be like, "There's only one thing I would improve. Your form was totally wrong here."
Yeah. Backing up a minute, you mentioned that you got to a certain plateau and you decided that you wanted coaching, and it sounds like it's benefited you a lot. At what point would you recommend that somebody look at coaching?
So I would recommend before you hit the 400-pound up point, because that's when you start your form and the way you're lifting starts to really, really matter, because you want efficiency of movement in order to lift heavier weights.
400 pounds for one lift.
Yeah.
What? I'm sorry, what was that? 400
pounds for which lift or any lift?
Any of them, to be honest with you. I mean, someone might be able to, all right, so there was someone, some kid always comes in, whether it be TRP, Married Red Pill, or even an RPC, and they'll brag that they hit 300 after lifting for 4 months. That has nothing to do with muscle strength, not whatsoever. It just happens that they were tough enough to push it up. But they will not be able to keep that up. I absolutely guarantee they can't keep that up. I see it every day. There's a kid in the gym who deadlifts 600 pounds, and he looks like an 18-year-old with skinny noodle arms, but yet he cannot squat for crap and he can't bench for nothing. that's because he just muscles out his deadlift, because that makes him feel better about himself. He loves it. He struts around after he does it because no one else, very few people are deadlifting 600 pounds, but he can't do anything else. And that's true of a lot of people. They can suck it up and get it done. But at the end of the day, being able to do it consistently on call, you've got to work at it.
You mentioned mobility as a big part of your regime. How do you look at mobility, and what is your approach to that overall?
Well, I've a couple of advantages. One, my gym has a number of different coaches for different things. So we have a mobility coach that I can tap into, and he hangs around the gym, so he sees what I'm doing. And if I've got a problem, I'll go talk to him, and he gives me adjustments. But I focus on primitive movements, ancestral movements, whichever you want to prefer to call it. But these are things that physiologists, chiropractors, and sports therapists use to judge how well an athlete can move. And these are based on basic movements we are as infants, things we don't have to learn. A baby doesn't have to learn how to crawl, they just do it. Baby doesn't have to learn how to walk, they just eventually do it. So that's why in one of the first movements, it's called dead bug or happy baby, where you're on your back and you're kind of just moving your arms and legs. You move your left leg and right leg back and forth, and you do that a few times. And what this does is activates your neurological system, your central nervous system, and gets the muscles moving. So to caveat that as an example, many people don't know that your glutes fall asleep after about 20 minutes. So if you're sitting there doing work, your glutes stop functioning. You get up, get a cup of coffee, and go back and sit down. You may not feel it in your glutes, but they aren't moving, and your thighs and your hips are bearing the weight of that movement. Now, a lot of guys get out of work, go to the gym. They might, pretend they're going to stretch out their thighs or something. I don't know what that's going to do them. And then they get in and they hit some heavy weights. Their glutes are supposed to be the muscle that moves that weight, and the glute is not even moved. Their thighs and their hips are bearing the weight. And as soon as they start increasing weight, they're going to start hurting themselves. So that, going back to those ancestral movements, it starts waking up the body, the muscle groups you want, in order to hit those heavier weights. So that's
feeling convicted, Jerry. I'm standing now. Thank you.
Yeah, me too.
I'm actually not even joking. You have to do it. If you're going to lift, I spend 30 or 40 minutes before I even hit the weight. I'm on that mat that you'll see in the video, looking like a baby Shamu rolling around the grass.
So I have a question. Mobility. Where does stretching fall under the umbrella of mobility? What's your opinion on dynamic versus static stretching? Does that fall within the mobility? Do you do it before and after workout? That's something I've kind of been learning, and I feel like that's going to help long term with lifting and making sure you don't get injured. Can you shed a little bit of light on that?
Yeah, there's still a lot of opinion based on whose theory. I mean, I say it's theory because it's all very useful knowledge, but to me, I don't think cool downs are as effective as a warm up. And when it comes to stretching of any kind, I personally believe, as well as I've learned and been taught from my coaches and seen in my own performance, it has to be coupled with dynamic movement of the joint and the muscle group you're going to start working out that day. You don't have that nerve activation going on in the muscles, you're not going to get anything. And they're the U of M and their physical therapy department they're doing studies right now, and you guys can look this up. Let me give you the right term because I actually looked it up myself. I had to write this down myself. But they're doing MRI studies with athletes, having them move muscle groups and watching the nerves activate wherever they are. And
ooh, that's cool.
So they're seeing it, it relates kind of to pressure points of the body and stuff. So they're seeing it. Let's see, where is that at? Yeah, I'll get to it here in a little bit. I'll find it eventually again. But,
yeah, sure. And if we don't get to it in the show, just let us know and get it in the show notes.
Oh, here it is.
Okay.
You want to look up applied kinesiology. Applied kinesiology. That's what you want to look up.
Applied kinesiology. Okay, so mobility, should you be doing mobility movements before you work out and after you work out? Does it matter really? And you mentioned before that you kind of custom tailor your mobility movements to what you're going to be working out that day.
Yeah.
That might have been too much all in one question.
I think it's more important before you lift versus after. If you feel like you need to do something after, then do it. But I don't do anything after. After I'm done lifting, I shake hands with my coach, tell him he's a bastard for the workout, and then I walk out the door.
Awesome.
But I do spend a lot more time making sure everything's going to function when I need to make it lift. So one of the big things I add is that, like I said, I've got some hip problems, mostly from my military service, mostly because I've just neglected them for a long time. So I have to work on the flexibility. And two of those exercises are, I take a foam roller, stand it up on end right next to my hip. I pick my leg up, whichever leg it's on that side, pick it all the way up past that. So it goes it's far past the foam roller as I can. And then I drop it to its side. So as much of a 90-degree angle between me and my leg as I can get. And then I bring it back up and put it down. I probably do 10 reps like that and then switch to the other side. So because when you're squatting, your hips need to open up. You need to, because if they're all tight and they're locked in, your thighs are going to do more work than your glutes are going to do. And that also means you need to start stretching out your hamstrings.
So I think we could probably spend the rest of our time talking mobility, and I would actually like to do that. There are, I'm sure, a lot of other things that we really should cover for some of our audience as well. One of the key topics that comes up a lot, and I'm sure you've seen plenty of these posts. Yeah, I'm not lifting right now because I got injured. And I used to make a lot of fun of those because it's like, well, don't injure yourself, dummy. Well, right now I'm kind of rehabbing a back injury right now, and I'm not deadlifting. And so here I am eating crow. What do you do to rehab an injury? And you've mentioned that you've had a few, some even recently.
Yeah.
Well, and keep in mind too that he gave me some advice a little over a year ago. It was almost 2 years ago when I injured myself, got a hernia doing deadlifts. So that advice has been proven out over the last couple of years, has been very, very helpful. So please go ahead.
And you asked that question, and the one major injury that I had, even more than my back, because it really ended up not being my back, ended up being my hip muscles getting tight because I wasn't flexible. My thighs and everything were compensating for what my hips and what my glutes should have been doing. So, and it's still haunts me to this day, because muscles don't want to get back to the way they were. They want to go the way they're more comfortable. So the big injury I had, the biggest actually in my life as a result of lifting, was in a jiu-jitsu tournament. I was in a match, and the guy picked me up, believe it or not, and slammed me down on my shoulder. Now, he did not do the technique correctly because he hung on to me, which is more of a self-defense technique. Because when you hold on to the guy in that throw, your arm is pinned and you can't move so that you fall correctly, and you take that energy across your arm. I had literally fell on the joint directly onto the ball socket, which caused a stage 2 dislocation with AC joint impingement. It's as close to a full dislocation as you can get. I couldn't bench. I just couldn't do it. The movement alone was extremely painful. So went to the gym the next day, told my coach what had happened, and that's when I spent more time with the mobility coach than I'd ever had before that. And if you say, I can't do this because, I hurt my shoulder, right? And that's what I thought. My bench was done. And my bench is my weakest lift of all. Nope. What it meant is now I have to work all the other muscle groups except the pecs. So before my workout, I had a series of 4 or 5 band exercises that I had to do. Like my left arm had to do the equal amount of my right. My right was the hurt one. So if I did 10, if I could only get through 10 band stretches on that, I had to do them on my left. And there were a lot of different ways they had me move them. One was, I'll try to explain it. The band was, I'd say I'm facing the wall. The band is tied onto something on my left side, and I was pulling my right arm across, right? I locked my elbow and my upper arm against my body, and I was just moving my right arm back and forth, in and out, pulling against that band. And there were a bunch of series of these, so that I was working all the other connective accessory muscles around my shoulder. Then it was things like, since I couldn't push, That was the only movement that hurt. I did a lot of pulling. So my coach had me do a lot of pulling exercises with dumbbells. I was doing upright bent over rows, a lot of wide arm, what are those, lat pull downs? Like with the wide arm bar, with a mag bar. There's another machine, they just call it the red and black machine, where you grab it and you pull, you put weights on it as much as you can, and you pull it forward. It's like a front row. But it's you just pull it forward and you just let the machine go back. So I was doing a lot of that. And in addition, what I didn't realize what he was doing, he was also rebuilding my bench form. So I was doing a lot of tricep work as well. Tape press, the JB tape press, which is an absolute painful thing. You do it with a safety squat bar, you bench it, and then you bend at the elbows until the bar touches your forehead, and then you push it up again. That is brutal. And so now here I am, like a year and a half later, I think, and my shoulder is completely rehabbed. I don't even feel anymore. But now where I was once benching wide arm, I'm now benching with a medium grip. They totally rebuilt my bench without me ever having benched for a good long time. I mean, I didn't start benching again until like late last winter.
So how long of a break did you have rehabbing your bench?
Without looking up my records, because we have a Google spreadsheet that I have my whole history on there of lifting. It was probably 8 months. I didn't do an actual bench. I was doing nothing but accessory work and other muscle work.
Oh, wow,
how would you compare your strength now? Or I guess, this year's been a bit of a tough one, but when it came back to actually benching again, how quickly were you able to rebuild your bench in terms of strength?
Well, I can give you right now so since I got out of the hospital and back again, say it started at 185, I'm now back up to about 300.
Nice.
Oh. So you're not an advocate of just push on through it and just be a man and be alpha and just, work it anyways?
No, in fact, because it's not the injuries you do right today that are going to kill you. It's the ones you did 10 years ago that are going to haunt you for the rest of your life. If you don't take care of the injury, it will be with you forever.
That's one thing I was going to ask too, is as far as age, I remember you saying you're about 46, 47.
Yep.
And how would you say age has affected all this as you get older, and what are the things to be aware of as you get older?
I think with age, I don't think age matters so much, because I look at guys like Louis Simmons. He doesn't lift anymore, but I mean, he was in his 50s and breaking records. There's a guy at our gym. He's 65 and he's squatting over 700 pounds. What I think older lifters have to look out for is the injuries they have done in their past that are going to come back and haunt them. So they need to be doing, the mobility work. They need to be doing all the accessory muscle work, because they're bringing things to the table that a young guy isn't. But a young guy is bringing his ego to the table that's going to cause all the injuries that we experience as older men.
So when you talk about a young guy bringing his ego to the table, what would you have as advice for the guy who says, I just want to get as high as I can, as fast as I can. And so every, week, every month, they're trying to make a significant up to their PR. Good strategy, bad strategy? What do you say?
It's a bad strategy. It's an diminishing one. If they're doing nothing more than what they call progressive lifting, it means a gradual overload of the weight. Like Strong Lift 5x5 is a perfect example of progressive gradual overload. It's fine to get you acclimated for a while. There's a lot of debate about how effective it is after a certain point, and the consensus is after 315 on any 3 lifts, you need to move on to something else. And I'd even argue that you need to move on to a more conjugate method-based system where you're training at like an 80-90% during the week, and then you're testing yourself out at a 1 rep max after 6 weeks. Because if you constantly work at an overload situation, you're constantly pushing that PR, so you feel better at the end of the week or at the end of the day. It's like, I beat yesterday's record, no problem. you're going to eventually hit what they call the law of accommodation, where that means your muscles are eventually just not, they're going to get used to that. And when you want to go add 10 pounds and then just try to max out a PR, you won't do it based on strength. You'll do it based on determination. And like I said, that's unsustainable.
So this is something that I was kind of researching right before I had an injury, and the conjugate periodization system that I was looking at talked about how a lot of once you get up to like advanced lifting, you're not really gaining a lot of muscle. It's mostly nerve recruitment, that you're increasing the percentage of nerve recruitment. And you want to change your lifts every I guess the exercise, your main exercise, every 1 to 3 weeks, depending on your what level of lifter you are and how well you're doing on your lifts for those for the current time you're at.
Yep, that's true.
So
one question I had about that. Oh, go ahead, Levi.
I want to can you quickly kind of categorize what would be like beginner, intermediate, and then advanced? And is elite considered above advanced, or is that within advanced?
So it depends on what measurement you're going by. So if you're talking about elite, you're talking about a combined of 3 lifts of over 2,000 pounds.
Okay.
If you're advanced, you're probably between the 1,500 and 2,000 pounds of the 3 major lifts.
Okay.
And if I recall correctly, past conversation, you and I were chatting, and you humorously noted that most people, when they talk about the 1,000-pound club, they're talking about their combination of the 3 main lifts, right?
Yes.
Whereas you say the people in your gym, what's their 1,000-pound club?
Our 1,000-pound is usually 1 lift.
When you get 1 lift over, and you sent a video of a guy from your gym doing that with his deadlift. It was impressive.
Yep. And that was, and not to disparage what Matt just did in that video, but that was what we call oh crap, I'm losing the term. But anyways, it's not a true deadlift because he's at knee level. He's at the sticking point. So what he's training with that 1,000-pound lift, he was training just the pure strength of picking it up. It's quote unquote easier to do. So you can do it from blocks, you can do it from a power rack, but you're training you're training the speed of the lift, not the actual lift.
So you're saying we shouldn't be that intimidated because he could probably only actually deadlift 950 instead of the 1,000 that we saw in the video, right?
No, he can actually lift a lot more than that. He's an Atlas. He's a strong lift guy, or strong man. So he does the Atlas stones.
Oh man,
I've seen him do 500 as an overhead press.
Whoa,
that's
awesome.
Crazy. So real quick before we move on too far, beginner and intermediate, you didn't touch on those. What would you consider beginner and intermediate for lifting?
A beginner is like under 300 pounds. Intermediate is between the 3 and maybe 1,000 pounds.
Okay, gotcha.
Real quick, as we're on the topic of kind of periodization and training methodology, where does deloading play a role in your training?
Yes.
And what is deloading for those who might not know what deloading is?
So deloading is working at like a 10 or 20% of your max lift. And what that does is that it lets your muscles rest because you're not working as hard, clearly, but it's like the way I think of it, and I cannot use the words my coach uses all the time when he's talking to me about what we're doing, but it keeps your muscles ready to go, right? It doesn't give them a full break, so they shut down, they stop working, but coming in, because you're broken down for about 5 weeks, you're breaking down, and then you're going to test out, or you're going to go into a competition for that 1 week before that. You work at a 10 or a 20% level to keep the muscles going, to make them, wake them up, keep them exercising, keep them awake, but you're not stressing them or overloading them, so that when you go to do your test or a competition, you're ready to hit it and hit it strong.
Moving a little bit away from the kind of methodologies of lifting and some of those finer points, talking a little bit more on a macro scale. We're a Christian podcast, and so obviously we have an audience that is interested in the faith side of things. As you look around churches, it may be different in your area, but I can speak of my own experience, having moved around my corner of the world quite a few times. there's not a lot of impressive physical specimens of men in most churches that I've ever attended. What's your take on that? I mean, you've moved around a lot in the military, I'm sure, and you've probably attended a variety of churches, seeing your history. What do you think the reason is?
And I'll add a corollary to that question, by the way. Do you feel like in the church that you've ever been looked down on for being a powerlifting big guy?
So the first question, I think it's just because it might be a sense of pride for some guys. The church the one I kind of go to, but not really, because I can't, as most guys at RPC, you get tired of the watered down message and just the lukewarm nature of everything. But it's definitely, you're looked at because they think it's prideful, that you walk in, and it's not like I'm wearing a badge that says, I just lifted, 5,000 pounds today. What'd you do? But you can tell. I mean, you can tell who lifts. The muscles are there. The shirts are. It's just the way you are, and the confidence you have, and the way you hold yourself. So I think there's a matter of pride to it. I also think that because it takes a lot of time. I mean, I've been lifting for 20 years, so some guys, some younger men are going to say, man, if they look at the guy who powerlifts, I see it in the gym sometimes. Every year you get some new guys in and they start lifting, and then all of a sudden the competitors, the athletes walk in and they're monsters and they're throwing heavy weights around, the heavy metal music cranks up, and they don't know what to do, and they turn around and walk out, probably don't come back. Occasionally you see one of the guys stick around for a year or two, but it's just, it takes a different mindset that this is what is best for me. And what was the correlator, John?
He had asked if you felt talked down, or either talked down to or looked down on.
Just in the sense that in the church, there's a lot of people who I've noticed that when there are big guys that show up in the congregation, whether they're bodybuilder type or powerlifting type, there is just this sense of, oh, well, he can't be a true Christian, because true Christians are these neat, clean shaven guys who are very slim and have the right clothes on and right.
I think that's actually more of an attitude of society than the church. That it's just infected the church. But what I get is that I get teased about how big I am. I mean, I'm 6'4", so I'm naturally large to begin with. And I just get teased about that. So, you either have to roll with the deprecation, or you just, as I have come to, as I just got time for this. So I just back off away from the guys, or even the women that are going to make fun of you or tease you about it or whatever. I don't get talked down or looked down to. I get teased or made fun of.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, and I think it's come up in a few different places on our Discord, I'm sure, but it's definitely on the subreddit. Just the idea of, lifting in general, there seems to be this resistance as though it were a matter of vanity or it would be unimportant. And, as far as why that is, there's probably many different ways you could slice that animal. But for our purposes, we understand that it's really valuable. We understand that not only is it really valuable, but lifting is not a suggestion. It's a mandatory part of the RPC approach to things. So for a guy who is hearing this and maybe wants to start getting involved in lifting, what would be your recommendation? You've spoken well of the 5x5 program to a point, but if you were approached by somebody in your congregation who is totally fresh and just said, hey, I want to get strong, I want to get aesthetic, what do I do about it? What would be your recommendation?
Well, I'd invite him to my gym, because every coach there is a competitor in one aspect of strength training. Some are powerlifters, some are bodybuilders, and they cross over. So that's where I would have them go, and then they can see the across the board, the dynamic, and they can pick what they want to do. Like I said, not every guy wants to lift over 500 pounds. It's just not. I mean, it takes a different mindset from that versus being a bodybuilder. I don't want to be a bodybuilder. I did that kind of thing with CrossFit, and I kind of like eating food a little bit more than you do on those circumstances, right? So that's what if the guy was truly interested, I'd sit down and talk to him what his real goals are, what he really wants to accomplish, and then I would show him where he can go to accomplish those. Life under the bar is a mindset. That's what's really being taught. It's I understand why we have guys post their stats. When MRP started doing it, I did not agree with it, because it leads to ego-driven things Because like I said, what if a guy just wants to hit 225, keep himself looking good? He wants to fill out that workout with a lot of work exercises to keep himself fit, in shape, and trim. But he doesn't want to get like the 63-inch pythons or whatever. He just wants to feel good about himself, be healthy, and keep up his appearance. And that's a perfectly fine goal. Although we all know that if you don't hit that quote unquote ideal aesthetic for the female persuasion, you've also got to have the confidence and the personality and everything else to match that. But I don't know. When it comes to some of this stuff, like I said, I've seen powerlifters of 400 pounds or higher get all the things we talk about. And they got women hanging all over them, and they're monsters in the gym. It's no question about it. But yet, when they put on that lifting belt, they look like the Michelin Man.
I think that brings up a really fair point, because I think that there is I wouldn't say a hyper focus, but definitely a focus on the strength aspect. I mean, the majority of our conversation, in part because of the nature of your training methods, we've really dealt with the strength part of it, less the bodybuilding and aesthetic part of it. And I think that for a lot of guys, you're right. They're not necessarily interested in getting that big and all of the attendant training that comes with it, and more of that aesthetic part of it. So, I think that's a really good word. And for anybody listening who thinks that, posting your stats is all about who's got the biggest dick in the room, that's certainly not the purpose behind it. In fact, I guess, pose the question to the group here, especially the other mods. Why is it that we require people to post their stats? We actually get asked that quite a bit.
The reason I will give for everybody is because posting your stats is what gives you the ability to track, are you improving or not? And if you're not putting up yourself in a position where you can say, here's where I was 6 months ago, here's where I am today, then there's no way for anybody, especially yourself, to be able to know, am I on the right track? Am I moving forward? And so if a guy is not posting his stats or not willing to do that, then he has no way of being able to track that.
Well, and I'm going to add too, when it comes to relationship issues, the reason we require people to post their stats is because, and I made this in a comment recently, people are always looking for that, one weird trick to get the girl. And they think if they just do this, or they don't do that, or they say this certain thing, or they're funny enough, or, the right timing, and all those things are not unimportant. But they post their stats and you find out that they're, running once a week. They're 50 pounds overweight. It gives you a sense of, okay, you're trying all this stuff, but you know what? It's an attraction issue. And if you would lose 50 pounds, put a little bit of muscle on, you're probably going to be playing the game on easy mode at that point. And that's part of the reason that for relationship issues, that rule is in place, because so many people are looking to try to find that technique without developing the attraction. And they're setting themselves up for a very hard road, and they're going to be failing. And then they're going to say, oh, this doesn't work. Well, yeah, it does. But, you want to look the best you can where you're the most confident, so that you can make the best approach and feel good about yourself when you do it.
Yeah, I would just really sum it up saying it's for their benefit. We don't get our rocks off by seeing like, oh, wow, I'm stronger than that guy. It doesn't really matter, because stats don't tell you a lot of information after a certain point, right? There can be a guy who's 6'2" and his bench is maybe 225 as his 1 rep max. He might actually still be a really aesthetic looking dude, but if that same guy posts in his, bench max is 105, well, we know there's a problem there. It's, your doctor takes a lot of chart information on you, mostly so that they can figure out what's wrong. And so that's a big part of it. And if somebody's posting these things and they're not posting their stats, it makes it really difficult to get to the bottom of it. And to Chuck's point, if somebody's not posting their stats, well, we don't know if it's a likely aesthetic issue or if it's more of how he's approaching the situation, or both. So really, for anybody who's wondering, why is this a thing? It's so we can give helpful advice and we don't waste anyone's time.
Yeah. And like you said, I the numbers don't tell the full story of what's going on. But I will say, for the guy who's listening to this, who's still lukewarm about what he's doing when he's lifting, you can read comments like, well, I'm just playing with dumbbells right now. Or I'm going to do a little bit of running and walking and get used to the whole idea of working out. I can tell you right now, the way you approach the bar is the way you approach your life. Deadlifts alone are probably the most emotional lift you'll ever do. There have been times when I've walked up to that deadlift bar and every negative thought that I've ever had that day or every problem that I'm going through will enter in my mind and I can't lift it. It doesn't matter how much that is. So if you can't get a hold of your mind when you're talking to your woman, you're talking to your boss, you're talking to your friends, you can't control your
Talking to your barbell.
Yep. I'm going to guarantee you ain't going to deadlift. It's just not going to happen for you.
So I'm going to actually, real quick, if I can interrupt, I want to pitch this question actually back to you to expand on it a little bit. So you're saying girls cry at the end of movies, guys cry when they deadlift. But more seriously, what are the emotional or internal benefits, I guess I should say, of lifting? You've mentioned one of them already at least, but I know it's more than that. So what does a guy benefit from lifting from the internal perspective and just lifting in general?
The mindset you gain is the one that you have that of approaching hardness all the time, difficulty all the time. The barbell never gets weaker, never. It's still 45 pounds and whatever weight you put on it. Doesn't matter if you saw it yesterday, 2 hours ago, or 3 weeks ago. That bar remains the same. You only get weaker or stronger. And that's the same thing with life in this world today. It doesn't care. It's there doing whatever it's going to do. And we either get weaker or stronger. So you have to make the decision of which way you're going to go. And that sometimes, I mean, I'm more direct than most people are, but that's just the way I am these days. But that's how I see it. Yeah, that steel is what it is. It doesn't lie to you. It doesn't care about your feelings. It is what it is. And you have to learn to either lift it or not.
Well, see, and there's an analogy there with God. Although God does care about us, God does not change either. He is the same yet today, yesterday, tomorrow, forever. And so there are some similarities there that from a spiritual aspect are good to think about.
So I have a quick
pitching
question.
kind of a
Hold on, Oz, I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
So how much does it cost for a trainer? Like, I've never hired a trainer. And I guess, what do you look for in a trainer? Do you look for like, hey, he's doing what I want to do, and then the cost associated with that?
So I pay $145 for the gym and the trainer, 45 for the gym, 100 for the trainer, and that's per month. That's about a good price for a trainer. And
Okay.
the best way to pick one is, does he look and do what you want to? And you have to vet him for, just like we vet guys in Red Pill, you have to vet
Just
him
like
for,
discipleship.
Yep. You have to
Couldn't
make sure
resist.
that he is what he says. Cause I even when I was looking for coaches, I ran into one that claimed was a power lifter. He talked the talk, but after a couple weeks, I realized it was crap. He wasn't giving me a workout. I would show up and all it was a sales pitch to buy more features, buy more packages. Your coach is going to give you a workout. He's going to say, get it done. Let me, and he'll look at it at the end of the week and he'll set you for the next week. He'll keep you on a path, but he's not going to be right there beside you going rah, rah, rah. But he'll get you on a path. He'll coach you along, show you what you need to do. And there's a little bit on your part that you have to prove that you're really into it, that this is what you want to do. Because Ben, he's a competitor himself, both strongman and national competitions. So he doesn't have time to sit there and look at me all the time. I probably won't see him for a week or two, and then he'll come in, and then I'll hear him across the gym, get your ass lower to the ground. And that'll probably be all I hear from him.
Nice. And then I guess resources. You talked about for beginners finding some trainers. And for me, at the gym that I'm at, there are no trainers. Like, there's a lot of big dudes that are lifting heavy weights. And I don't mind going up to them and asking them, hey, could you train me? But if there aren't those guys, what resources would you recommend for, I guess, people that are looking to get into lifting long-term and reduce their possibilities of injury?
Well, I know my trainers, Ben particularly, because I didn't go to the gym where he works out of at first. I was in another place because I had a contract. And what he did was just he goes to send me videos of your workouts, and I'll post them on a Google spreadsheet, and we'll do it that way. And I did that for like a year, almost a year, until I realized it was more beneficial going to his gym because he has the specialized equipment that he was telling me to do.
Okay.
And Ben is guy. I know he's got lifters in other parts of the country that he does that for. So if you're really interested, I could hook you up with him, and you can work it out however you want with him, or you can find in your own area someone who does that. Because I know in almost all areas there are powerlifting gyms around. I did travel to Florida a couple years ago quite often, and I looked it up, and there were powerlifting gyms in there. I asked if I could come in on a daily pass, paid $10-15, and they had no problem with it.
So just to make sure I understand then, you're saying that I'm assuming this is what you're saying at least, that there is a difference between a trainer at a powerlifting gym versus a personal trainer that might exist at pretty much any other gym, correct?
Yes, 100% different.
Okay, so if somebody is looking to achieve a powerlifting goal, then they're going to want to look for a specific powerlifting gym and find the trainers there versus would you see a value to somebody using a generic personal trainer?
Yeah, well, again, like I said, it depends on your goals. You want to find the trainer that exemplifies the way you want to look and where you want to be. If they can't lift what you want to lift, then you probably shouldn't be using them as a trainer. And that goes, from bodybuilding to CrossFit to powerlifting, all of those things combined. That's what you want to look for. Ben just happens to be, in my opinion, my coach happens to do a lot of the different things, and he's a certified degreed kind of guy. So he's got all this background. Plus he does sports training for a lot of the universities around here. So he's got a lot of background. That's why I use him as an example for a lot of things, but not all coaches are like that.
So here's a real question then. Your gym, does it have a Smith machine? What do you think of the Smith machine? I know it's a very contentious thing.
Get out of here.
It does not have a Smith machine, but I think they're great to lean on drinking your Coke or whatever.
Well, because I know it sounds like a retarded question, but really, the Smith machine, I see people over and over and over, they ask about the Smith machine. Personally, I don't really see any benefit to it other than something that a trainer at a regular gym can take you over to, do a few things on, and make you feel comfortable enough to want to stay and get a membership. Other than that, but people who contend that thing over and over and over again, that's why I wanted to ask.
It can, if you've never done a squat before, it can definitely show you how to do it in a safe way. But then I'd argue you should be using a safety squat bar, which even for a professional lifter, a safety squat bar is just, it's rough because it forces you in the proper position. You just don't have a choice.
So just to make sure everybody's clear, since some of the listeners might not know what a Smith machine is, if I understand correctly, that's the squat rack that has the bar on a series of posts to force it so that it only goes vertical, right?
It's a track, yeah.
Training.
And so with that, is it fair to say then that if there's any value in using a Smith machine, it's predominantly to make sure you are forced into using proper form?
That's the only reason I can see for using it.
Yeah, and I would even argue that it probably doesn't really help you with your form that much in the long run, just from a stabilization standpoint. Yeah. See, I think it's a very valuable machine because it shows you who the noobs are in the gym.
There you go.
It's actually there to just be a decoy. So we were talking about some resources. You'd mentioned coaching as resources. Are there any online resources that you follow, publications, YouTubers, like anybody, or forums that you found beneficial?
I follow because my coach and the guy who owns the gym are Westside Barbell, I guess they call certified. I read a lot of their books and a lot of what they do, but otherwise what I do on YouTube, it runs the gambit. If Ben's thrown a new workout at me, instead of going asking him, how do I do this? I look it up on YouTube to see how the motion works and everything. So my YouTubing kind of things are just across the gambit of whatever a guy is showing me the workout to do. But the most of my stuff is I read the books off of the Westside Barbell Westside Barbell website, because they're the ones that revolutionized American powerlifting.
So is Broadway going to put out a musical version of this? Because I might enjoy that.
I was gonna say this sounds up John's alley.
If they do, I'll be the first in line. I'll probably watch it all week long.
Hey, if any Broadway moguls are out there, there you go. There's your $1 million idea. So we've been talking about lifting a ton, and we haven't touched on the diet component of it, and that's obviously a big part, the fuel we put in our bodies. What is your general philosophy toward diet?
Food is fuel. That's all it is. Occasionally, I'll splurge on something, but you got to eat for what you're doing. And you also have to, more importantly, you have to know your body. I can give you a diet from my CrossFit diet days if you work out 5 days a week and you walk at least 20 minutes, what they call empty stomach cardio, 20 minutes a day, keeping your heart rate under 120 20 beats, you will lose 20 pounds in 6 weeks. I can guarantee it. I did it for a number of years and dropped a significant amount of weight in a year's time. It can be done. You may not like life very much, but it will, you'll learn that food is nothing more than fuel for your body. But now that I'm powerlifting, I don't track macros so much anymore as I do just total calories for the day, because I don't want to look like the Michelin Man. I make sure that at least 60% of my calories come from lean proteins. I make sure I don't get more than 100 grams of carbs a day, just because I have a problem with carbs. I just balloon up with them. And I make sure I drink a gallon of water a day, at least. If it's a particularly hard work, I got a particularly hard schedule coming up in a week, because Ben posts my schedules out, I'll increase that to 2 gallons a day. But diet is important, but where you are and what you know about your body determines how much you track. And like I said to one guy, if you aren't measuring it, you're not managing it.
What are the important things in your mind to be measuring as somebody who is getting into lifting, whether aesthetically or for strength, or both?
Well, between the two, you should be tracking total carbs in. You should be tracking how much water you're drinking. You should be tracking protein and carbs, and then how much sleep you're getting. That is ultimately important. If you're not getting 8 hours of sleep, you are not recovering effectively. I think, I don't know who I was talking to. I think it was Levi when we were playing Lords of Waterdeep. But you need 8 hours of sleep, because if you wake up the next day feeling even worse than you did when you walked out of the gym, you did not recover properly. You need 8 hours of sleep. You need at least a gallon of water, and you need at least, at the minimum, 60% of protein of your calories. Wait, let me phrase that again. 60% of your calories need to come from protein.
So
let me ask this real fast. Yeah. So when I'm lifting, I noticed that, especially if I've taken a break off, like when COVID hit, I had probably 6 months where I couldn't do squat before I started buying my home gym stuff and realizing, country's not going back the way it used to be. So I get my home gym. Every time I have a break off, the first 2 to 4 weeks, my body is just insanely sore after I'm done lifting. And then even if I'm consistently hitting PRs and I really pushing it where I should be at my limits, I noticed that after that first month, I just never get sore again. Is that a fault in my routine, or is that my body's adjusted and that's a good thing? Or are you saying, no, you really just need to change it up so you are getting sore in different ways? What would you say to that?
My first reaction is, without seeing what your workout was, I'd say you're not acclimatized back again to lifting weights. Because when I got back after being in the hospital, I didn't do any of the major lifts for about 3 weeks. It was all joint work, moving joints, dumbbells, just moving barbells around, and doing a lot of band work, so that my joints were used to the movements again. I mean, I had other issues. Losing 60 pounds in 2 weeks is not natural. So my center of balance was off again. My body had to relearn everything. But the same thing goes for that long of a break off. I don't know what you did. You probably picked it right back up where you left off again, expecting to increase 5 pounds every time. You should have probably spent about 2 weeks reacclimating your body to the weight. And
right, which what I'm saying is I was able to get my weights my lifts almost back identically to where they were within that first month or two usually.
Sure.
But
Sure.
what I'm curious about is the fact that why is my body not getting sore anymore, even though I'm still hitting those upper limits that I did before I had the time off?
Oh,
Is that
wait.
something where I should be focusing on different lifts that will make me sore again?
Did I
Or is it
misunderstand you? So when you got back into it, you didn't feel it at all?
no, when I first got back, I was sore like crazy for a month or so. And then
Oh.
after that, my body just kind of adjusts. And it's been months since I felt truly sore after a lift again. Does that just mean I'm not lifting hard enough?
I would think so. Or you're coming up against the law of accommodation, which, remember I said that basically your body's getting used to what you were doing, so you don't feel it anymore, which also means you're really not increasing.
Right. That's probably where I'm at.
It's the law of accommodation is a decrease in adaptation due to repeated stimulus over time. So you probably without really seeing what you've been doing, I would say scrap your workout and do something different. Like all right, here's a good one. Instead of just doing the straight up barbell press, do a 2-board press, where if you can do it alone, they even make foam pads that you can attach to the bar that will be about the height of 2 2x4 stacked together. Do that, push down, and that will, once it hits your chest, push up. Because now you're not training the full range, you're training a different part of that range. You're training the hardest part of it. And
I hear you.
You'll feel a difference.
So in that scenario, the advice is essentially just change up the routine more frequently.
Yep.
Perfect.
How does volume play into effect there? Because similar to John, I was reaching a point where I wasn't getting sore from the workouts much anymore, unless it was a particularly tough day. But then I started working out with a partner, and with a partner, I felt comfortable pushing the volume further into some of the deficits, push it to failure, continue onward with some assistance, and that really changed it up for me. And I have noticed not only an increase in soreness, but then recovery led to greater strength gains, and I posted some PRs recently from that. So what does volume look like from a adaptation standpoint?
So again, there's a lot of variables. So depending on what you're trying to do, where you're at currently, but if you're trying to break the law and get some adaptation, in both instances, you need to have more volume. So if you're limited in your equipment availability, right, you got a home gym, but you don't have all the fancy gear, and it's always going to take you time to get it, just add more dynamic workouts to it. Like get yourself a set of exercise bands, and you can do a simple, lay on the ground on your back, put your arms up with a band and stretch them out, hold that for about a second, stretch it out to where your arms are touching the ground, your palms or your fists are touching the ground, hold that for about a second or two, and then bring it back slowly. Same kind of stretch, same kind of dynamic there. I would do that on a 4x20. And then I would do something like scapula push-ups. I would do maybe scapula rows and scapula pull-downs if you got a pull-down machine. So you start training different muscle groups of that major lift. Kind of like what I said in the beginning of rehabbing my shoulder. Instead of doing the major lift, I was working all the other muscle groups of that major lift.
One question I have that I've heard is there's a negative effect when you go to failure on volume. Is it beneficial for increasing volume to not go to failure, or what? Tell me what you think about that.
Like leaving one in the tank or something like that? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, 1 or 2 in the tank. I've heard that if you leave 1 or 2 in the tank, that statistically the studies have shown you can push more volume.
That is true of a lot of the strength. And so, like I said, there's a lot of different theories. So what you're talking about comes from Westside method and the conjugate method, is that for your dynamic workout, you're working at an 80 to 90% maximum of your maximum strength. And even in that, you need to be increasing at 5 pounds so that 80, 90% gets better until you test out after 6 weeks, test your 1 rep max. That's your new baseline. And you work out 80, 90% of that. But if you're constantly working at failure, which is what I was telling you, what progressive gradual overload is, you're going to eventually hit that law of accommodation where your muscles are going to get used to that stimulus, which then will decrease your effectiveness over time.
Okay.
It taxes your central nervous system a lot to do that too, right? That's where a lot of that tiredness comes from.
Yep.
So
Well,
conventional or sumo?
I'm a sumo guy because that's what feels better on my hips. But I think like a lot of powerlifters are coming to realize you got to train both.
Cool.
So let me ask one more thing, and I think we're probably getting close to needing to wrap up here. The time frame, what does timing look like for you? So it sounds like you start off with some mobility, stretching type stuff, and then you move into your actual lifting. And I don't mean like how much time do you spend on each lift, but more generically, how much are you spending warm up, stretching, mobility, actual powerlifting versus cool down? What does that look like for you?
Well, I don't cool down. I don't need to. I don't feel like I need to. But if you do it. But I'll spend 30 to 40 minutes doing mobility and warm up. And then my actual lift is between an hour and a half to 2 hours, 4 days a week. And that assumes I don't have to wait for anybody for any station. Cause I like to try to keep my time between reps or time between sets to about 2 to 4 minutes. So I can keep my heart rate at a good level to get a little bit of cardio action out of it. And so I don't like I'll be back after lunch kind of sign on the bell and walk away. So I get a little frustrated when I have to wait for someone else who has disappeared for 40 minutes and still got to wait and crap on the machine I need to use.
So even outside of your warm up, stretching, and mobility, you're still putting in a good hour and a half, 2 hours of just lifting.
Oh yeah. I mean the workout Ben's got me is that long. I mean, it's I can even post it if you guys want. I think I did it at one point, but I can show you how long it is in some cases.
I'd love to see it.
You do or you don't do actual cardio?
I do not do cardio because I'm not prey anymore.
Touche.
But I do go for a walk every day. I walk for about 20 or 30 minutes. Like I said, I do empty stomach cardio. So it's between a meal when I'm just before I'm going to eat dinner or maybe after 2 hours after lunch. And I keep the heart rate under 120. That keeps everything moving and keeps there's like 100 different theories, but I can't, no one likes bro science, but we can't deny that they are on to something, whether or not they actually understand what they're talking about. You can't deny the results of what they're doing. And
who is that?
The bro science. Bro science has got it. I mean, they don't know what they're talking about, but the results are there. And one thing they talk about is empty stomach cardio works. And they think that it's because your stomach is empty and you got to wake it up and all the flora and the fauna in your stomach. Once you start moving around just before you eat, they all get excited and they want to, your stomach wants to get working. I don't know if that's true. Medical science has not done enough research to determine that, but what they can't deny is the results of doing it.
So I want to come into the defense of bro science a little bit here, and you kind of make a good point in doing so. I think a lot of what we've talked about has been very well backed, and you clearly know your stuff, and we appreciate that. I think there's an intimidation factor, like any sort of pursuit, where there's a lot of jargon, there's a lot of experts out there, and there's a lot of dogma that can be associated with that. And I think that one of the roles that bro science plays to a certain degree is giving people different things to try, and if it works for you, the results are either there or they're not. Now, obviously, some bro science stuff is just plain stupid and it's going to get you injured or killed, so don't do that. But what are there any other sort of like bro sciencey things that you have found beneficial, even if you may not be able to explain it, or any of your lifting rituals? Because I think as I look around at other people lifting, I often find that people have a certain ritual and habit that they form.
And there's one thing before you answer that, because I do want to hear the answer to that. But I also want to say it's worth noting that the reason bro science is necessary a lot of the times is because the reality is there's just not enough funding in medical science generally to hit everything that would be necessary to all of the types of topics we're talking about, right? There's not enough money in the game to be warranting having some Harvard University graduate do all kinds of ridiculous tests on this and that. So there is limitations to what research science can do and why you need bro science in the first place.
Right. So little rituals and things. So there's been a recent in the last year or so, especially after COVID. Bro science thinks that if you're in a low oxygen state, and I was in that, most people recovering from COVID are in that state. Walking across the floor can wipe you out. You're not getting what is called perfusion. Oxygen is coming in, but it's not getting to your body as efficiently as it should. And this particularly hits athletes at the real professional competitive level when they're trying to work out, but they're getting tired and they're having trouble breathing and whatnot. There is a belief that if they take a little bit of sugar between their sets, that it'll give them the energy, it'll help them breathe better. I don't know of any science that actually supports sugar in the body helps respirations or perfusion. What I believe is happening based on, and for the reference, I'm a paramedic. What I believe is happening is that when they take the sugar, whether it's, some guys will carry out a jar of honey, take a teaspoon of that. Some guys eat a couple gummy bears between sets. But what I believe is happening is that the sugar is hitting the body, causing insulin reaction in the muscle, which makes the muscle more acceptable or more efficient, or using oxygen more efficiently, because that corresponds with why insulin injections are all the rage now in bodybuilding. I don't know that for true because there's not a study to support that, but I look at the result.
What kind of injections?
Insulin.
Whoa, they're doing insulin injections like what, pre-workout or in between their sets?
No, they do it pre-workout.
Whoa.
Yep.
Trippy.
It's much harder to trace in a drug test.
Oh.
I got a question for you here. I'm the guy that earlier you mentioned, not trying to hit any records or anything. I'm 51. I just want to feel good. I want to look good. I want to be in shape, be decently healthy as much as possible. Rep ranges, hypertrophy, for the average guy doing the average workout, not looking to power lift. What would you say for the majority of exercises, a general guideline? What's better, low reps, high weight, medium reps, medium weight, high reps, low weight?
Oh, that's a hard one to answer. Overall, I think if you're doing that kind of thing, you want more volume. So that means more exercises in the given workout. So I would probably, I don't know, just off the top of my head, I'd probably do 10 different ones. I'd probably doing something like 4x20s or 3 by, if you really want that kind of look, the lean kind of strong fit look, maybe 3x30s even. So you're not looking for strength. You don't care about the number, but you're looking for the muscle to enlarge, to get bigger. Yeah, I'd be doing something like that. Fewer sets, around the 4 to 5 sets, maybe even 3, but I'd increase the reps based off that. And I would add, for that kind of individual, I'd probably add a lot more cardio, like maybe a 30-minute run. Not for like distance, but just to get your heart rate up and keep it going. You're not looking to run a marathon or anything, but.
So let me ask the flip side of that. Suppose we've got some listeners here on the other end who really get pumped up about they really get pumped up about the idea of heavy lifting. Do they have to give up on the idea of having a six-pack if they want to be a power lifter?
Nope, absolutely not. They're there. Ben's one of those guys with a six-pack. You can go on. I would argue you probably need to be doing a bulking phase where you're getting bigger in the winter to cover your mass, but then in the summer you do some cut, so you get in a different weight class for your lift. But you could absolutely have a six-pack.
Cool. It's been a pleasure having you on, man. This has been a fun podcast, and holy cow, one of our longer ones. But thank you for joining us.
Hey, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Catch y'all later.